today, I'm going to be talking about injury prevention from the perspective of a movement restoration specialist. So the word injury prevention gets thrown, the words injury prevention get thrown around a lot by a lot of different people. And I'm not super confident that every single person that says the word injury prevention actually completely understands what they're talking about. One of the most important things for injury prevention is having a definition. So definitions. So injury is a force. Injuries occur when a force overcomes the body's ability to stabilize it. So if you're jumping and you land and your knee can't stop you, something bad probably is going to happen. I mean, it could be anything. You could smash your knee on the ground, could be a hip injury, could be anything. Then stability. Stability is the ability to resist undesired movement. So the more stability you have, the less likely it is you're going to be injured. Kind of makes sense. There's a couple other definitions in here. It's a 10-minute presentation. I don't have time. If I say something and you don't recognize it, check the definitions. Hopefully they're there. Really quick, injury statistics across high school sports. So I hear a lot of parents talking about, I don't want my kid to do this because I'm worried about injury. I don't want my kid to do that, whatever. So I thought I'd just, give some statistics real quick. The most dangerous sport is football, not surprising. 3.96 injuries per 1,000 athletic exposures. So an athletic exposure is when one athlete either practices or plays or does something where they're at risk for injury. So for every 1,000, there's about 4. Girls soccer, 2.65, which is a lot higher than I thought it was going to be. Girls soccer is only 50% below football for injuries. And then men's wrestling was the third leading cause of injury in high school sports. All right, injury prevalence by type. The most common injury now are concussions. They account for 23% of injuries, and that's in every single sport. Actually, girls soccer, I think there were more concussions in girls soccer than football, if memory serves me correct. They're pretty close. If not, they're pretty close. Ankle injury, 17.6%. Knee injury, 14%. Low back pain. Not technically an injury, but 40% of athletes in high school are going to get low back pain in their academic year, in their sports, which is crazy. 4 out of 10. So injuries and their causes. I'm going to start with number 4, which is low back pain. Low back pain tells me a lot about an athlete or a person in particular. If somebody comes in to see me with low back pain, I know their core is not functioning as well as it could. If your core is not functioning well, there's literally nothing you can do correctly or as correctly as possible. I know there's probably going to be generally postural imbalances. And I also find out about any hip imbalances that are present. 85% of people with low back pain also have a hip imbalance. That's what research says. I think the number's actually higher. I have yet to find somebody with low back pain who doesn't have a hip imbalance. There are many hip imbalances I work with, but honestly, the most common among athletes and people in particular is not using their glutes, gluteal amnesia. So the glutes are the largest muscle in the body, and most people aren't using it. So if you're not using your glutes completely, that's about 50% of your athleticism you're leaving behind. All right, now onto the injury number 1, concussions. What causes all these concussions? The two biggest things that I see that in my opinion, cause concussions are postural imbalances and core imbalance. So for a postural imbalance, most people are walking around with their heads forward. And if you're walking around with your head forward, what's going on? You're going to have tight cervical extensors, long cervical flexors. So if you're running into contact as a football player, let's say if I ran into Rich Curry and I lowered my head and I put our helmets collide, if the muscles in the front of my neck aren't strong enough, my head is whipping back out of control. And that's going to subject the brain to a lot more force, a lot more impact than it would have if the neck was strong enough to stop the head from going back. And then that leads me nicely into core imbalance. So if you have a core imbalance, you're not going to have a strong neck. The deep muscles of the core and the deep cervical flexors, they're continuous. They can be dissected as one piece, and any weakness in the core is going to manifest in the neck as well. Next most common are ankle injuries. So most ankle injuries are caused by muscle imbalances, postural dysfunction, and motor dysfunction. So the most common muscle imbalance I see, which leads to ankle injuries, is anterior tibialis and calf imbalance. Now, everybody's walking around in shoes of the heel lift. Now, what do shoes of the heel lift do? Well, they elevate the heel. And what happens when the heel is elevated? My calves are shortened, my anterior tibialis is lengthened. And you do that for long enough, eventually you forget how to shorten your anterior tibialis. And another big issue, as far as ankle injuries are concerned, I've worked with about 3 or 4 dozen athletes. Most of them have a strength and conditioning coach or somebody who writes them a workout. None of them know what a tibia dorsiflexion machine is. None of them are doing dorsiflexion as a strength or a stability exercise. So a lot of these kids are running around. I call it running around on loose lug nuts. They didn't tighten the lug nuts all the way. The ones in the front are weak. The ones in the back are a little too tight. That's a big problem that I would like to see addressed. Forward weight shift. So when your head is forward, everything is forward. And if everything's forward, you're putting a lot more stress on your calves. Again, reinforces that muscle imbalance of the calves being too tight. And then a motor dysfunction. Most kids that I see have some sort of most people I see have some sort of local joint instability at the ankle. Either they can't control supination, pronation, dorsiflexion, or plantar flexion. Alrighty. How much time do I have left?
2 minutes.
All right. Knee injuries. Knee injuries are what I'm really passionate about. There are a lot of people out there that don't like the knee. They think it's a stupid joint. They think it was poorly designed. The knee really should never be injured. It's actually really, really stable. It only does two movements, which is going forward and going backward. You've got a little bit of tibial internal and external rotation. Most movement, though, in the knee happens forward and back. How do you screw this up? You don't screw this up. You screw something up below or you screw something up above. So most injuries are caused by the hips. So again, when somebody walks in to see me, I'm doing a postural assessment. I'm looking at where their knees are. Generally, they're probably going to have a core imbalance because they have a hip imbalance. If you have a knee injury, you have a hip imbalance. If you have a hip imbalance, you have a core imbalance. So the hips will put the knee out of place. Big example is valgus collapse. So can you see my knees here? Does this look right? No, it doesn't look right. A lot of athletes are running around like this. They're literally running like that, standing like that, squatting like that, doing everything like that. And this is actually hip internal rotation, tibial external rotation. It's the first 66% of an ACL tear. The other 33% is a shear force. So tibia will externally rotate, hip internally rotates, and then a shear force comes in and pop goes the ACL. And they can be prevented. Again, if you understand how the hips are supposed to work, how the core is supposed to work, how knees are supposed to work. And if everything works together, the knees are amazing. The knees, when you run and jump, you're putting about 5 to 10 times more, 5 to 10 times body weight force on your knee. So 4,000 to 8,000 newtons of force are going into your knee when you run and jump. It's actually 3,000 or 4,000 when you're going downstairs. So the knee can withstand a lot. Alrighty, what does a movement restoration specialist do to prevent injury? I talked about it a little bit. The most important thing that I have to prevent injury are a whole bunch of assessments, a battery of assessments. So assessments are answering questions. The questions I'm asking, in a postural assessment, do you have any major postural errors which increase your risk for injury? Is your head forward? Are you standing in valgus collapse? Do you have an anterior pelvic tilt? Do you have a walk around in a posterior pelvic tilt? All these things that increase your risk for injury, I'm asking whether or not you got them. And then a movement assessment. So how well do you perform on fundamental human movements? I mean, there are things that every single person should be able to do. Can you hinge? Can you squat? Can you do a split squat? Can you hold the single leg stance? Stuff like that. And if you want to be an athlete, you definitely need to be able to do it. I've got local stability assessments. I have a local stability assessment for every single joint in your body that moves. Everything from the wrists to the ankles, knees, core, all of that. And then a global stability assessment. How well does your body resist force as a whole? If you're forced this way, what happens? If you're forced this way, what happens? If you're not able to resist force in those directions, your body's going to be out of position. And injuries occur either when you're out of position or the joint can't stabilize the force. So one of those two things is happening in an injury. So what I do is I just make sure that no matter where you are and what you're doing and what force you're subjected to, you have the greatest chance of stabilizing that force and not getting injured. That is everything. That's a 45-minute presentation done in 10 minutes. That was 8 minutes. Wow. All right. There is time for questions. There's probably a lot of them. Anybody have a question? No, I did it.
How do you remember the Achilles injury?
Achilles. Yeah, so that would be that forward weight shift. When you wear a shoe with a heel lift for a long time, again, this is shortening. And when the calf shortens, the Achilles tendon shortens. And what happens to a lot of people, they forget how to lengthen their Achilles tendon. Their body forgets how to be in dorsiflexion. So the body is always writing motor programs from the day you're born until the day you die. You've never taken two identical steps in your life. Your brain is always learning. What happened? Did we make a mistake? Was the head too far outside? Whatever. So you're always learning. So if you start learning here, eventually you forget how to be here. And you forget how to be here if you end up there with a lot of force and the body doesn't know how to stabilize it, there's an injury. So those two things. It's a structural change in the calf. The muscle fascicle can actually become shorter, and it's also neuromuscular programming. The body forgets how to be in that, literally forgets how to be there.
How many coaches have the understanding of the body that you're describing?
Well, there probably are some out there. This comes from experience. So if it depends on what you're reading, and it depends upon your experience. I think a lot of what I have found out and understand is proprietary. Either the first person to discover it or the first person to talk about it, or the people that did discover it didn't talk about it loud enough, so I didn't hear about it. The answer is I don't know. I don't think it's very many.
I'm just wondering if it would be a good referral for you to go in and talk to high school.
They don't like me.
No.
Any other? That was a good question, Sue. That's why I'm doing it by myself. You know, we all think we're right, so we're all going to go off on our own and compete and see who's best. That's kind of how this works. Any other?
I have a question. So, ever since I met you, when I'm walking around, I see people, and I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Your
So-
body reading. Very
Right,
good.
Well, because it almost looks like they had an injury.
Yeah.
Now they're compensating for that.
Yes.
Is there a point where you're not able to help someone? Is there an age range that doesn't?
That's a good question. The sooner the better. I had a guy, 83 or 4 years old. He had done a lot of damage to himself and had a lot of structural damage. And I was able to help him. But yes, if your structure, I can do a lot for function. I can only do so much for structure. The guy didn't have an ACL. His knee had effectively built him an ACL by calcification, ossification, just filling the joint with nonsense. If you get yourself to that point, there's only so much that I can do for you. And then on the other side, it's how much are you willing to do for yourself. So you're going to do the exercises every day. Are you going to clean up your diet? Are you going to wear flat shoes? All the stuff that I tell you to do. That it's the reason you got where you are. If you're not willing to stop doing that stuff, I'm not going to be able to help you.
Other than see you, what's the first person somebody should do when their hips are imbalanced or in pain?
You can go to my Core Stability channel on YouTube. Great question, Beverly. Go to my Core Stability channel. Make sure you can do every single exercise. Outside of the lower body crunch, none of them are really that hard. Once you've got core stability, once your core stability is solid, then go do hip stability. Once you've done hip stability, you could have a problem with the knee or the ankle. I would, just go to my channel and work through every single stability exercise and make sure that there's not a single exercise you can't do, because they're all pretty easy relatively, and everybody should be able to do them.
And it's not just under your name.
What's that?
The channel is under your name.
Coach Brickman. Coach Brickman. So go to youtube.com/Coach Brickman. It's on my web. If you go to my website, you can click on the YouTube link and it'll take you there. Great question.
Coach Brick or Coach Brickman?
Coach Brickman. This
So
diagram.
let's say I have a shoulder injury.
Yes.
And my doctor, orthopedist, wants to cut.
Yeah.
What could you do? Let's say I meet you a week before
Yeah.
I have surgery. What could you do before the surgery? Maybe even avoid the surgery?
Yeah.
And what could you, if I still want to go through with the surgery, what could you do after?
So if you don't have access to me, the first person I would see is a massage therapist, and I would try to find someone who does Rolfing. Rolfing is a good one. They do a lot of work with posture, Postural Restoration Institute. I would see them. And then I would go to my shoulder stability playlist on YouTube, and I would work through all the shoulder stability exercises. But you can make structural changes to the shoulder without cutting. So if you do myofascial release, you can do myofascial release, and then you can do deep tissue release. That makes tremendous structural changes to the shoulder, which can help restore function. And most people are getting, and thank you for bringing that up, because for a frozen shoulder, a lot of people are sleeping on their shoulders, and that forces the shoulder into this position here, which puts a lot of stress on the clavicle, and it puts a lot of effectively end up with the shoulder blades stuck apart. So most of the people that I see with frozen shoulder don't really have a frozen shoulder. They have frozen scapula, where their scapula don't come back. They're stuck here. And so the first thing that I typically do for that person is just get their shoulder blades to be able to come back again. For every 1 degree of scapulohumeral range of motion you lose 2 degrees of glenohumeral range of motion. So if I slouch, you can try it right now. That's about as high as I can get my arm back. But if I pull my shoulders all the way back, I can get all the way up. All right.
All right.
Good.
Well done.
That's everything.